In ancient sagas, dragon fire is described as the wrath of the gods. But here at the Orcologist lab, we ask a purely physical question. Smaug's breath could melt steel and weaken even the rings of power. So why, when unleashing a blast exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius, are the dragon's soft tissues, esophagus, and tongue not instantly incinerated? How can a biological entity house an open fusion reactor within its body without self-destructing? Today we dissect the thermal insulation lining and the napalm glands of the Middle-earth great drakes. Welcome back, researchers, to report number 05 from the Orcologist lab. Before we can dissect the thermal paradox of Smaug, our protocols demand precise classification. In the taxonomies of Middle-earth, the creatures under review are not mere dragons, but Oroloki, great fire drakes. The Quenya term Oroloki translates directly to fire serpent, anchoring our analysis in the language of the First Age. This nomenclature is not a poetic flourish. It is a categorical boundary. Only the Oroloki exhibit the full suite of pyrogenic adaptations that concern us. The capacity to produce, store, and unleash a directed high-temperature incendiary jet. The earliest recorded Oroloki is Glaurung, the proto-drake of Angband, first sighted in the year 260 FA. Glaurung's wingless, quadrupedal frame and rudimentary venom glands mark him as the baseline for subsequent engineering. Lacking aerial capability and possessing only primitive fire breath, Glaurung represents the initial iteration, an imperfect weapon, but the template for all that followed. Over the centuries, Morgoth's workshop diversified the draconic lineage, but the fire drakes remained distinct from their cousins, cold drakes, who lack true pyrogenic systems, and the lesser worm breeds, which display neither combustion nor advanced armor. What then defines a great fire drake in anatomical terms? The presence of the glandula ignea, paired fuel glands hypothesized to synthesize a phosphorus-rich hydrocarbon emulsion, the development of a bioceramic silicate lining within the esophageal tract, capable of withstanding temperatures in excess of 3,000 degrees Celsius. The emergence of mineral-infused scales, not merely as armor, but as a functional heat shield. And a behavioral signature, the compulsion to sleep upon gold and precious ore, a trait with direct implications for integumentary reinforcement. Smaug, as the apex case, displays all these features in their most advanced forms. But the scope of this report is locked. We are not examining the cold-blooded worms of the Grey Mountains, nor the serpentine horrors of the East. Our lens is fixed on the engineered pyrogenic war engines, the Oroloki, whose fire shapes the fate of kingdoms. Having established the taxonomic boundary, we turn next to the question that haunts every lab notebook: why design such a creature, and to what end? To understand the true nature of the Oroloki, we must look beyond taxonomy and ask who would forge such creatures and for what purpose. The evidence points unambiguously to Morgoth, the original architect of destruction. Unlike the Valar, whose creations reflect the logic of nature, Morgoth's approach was that of a warlord engineer, treating living beings as modular components in a grand arsenal. The earliest prototype, Glaurung, was more siege engine than beast, ground-bound, formidable, yet limited. His wingless bulk and primitive fire breath reveal not an accident of evolution, but the first draft of a weaponized lineage. In the forges of Angband, dragons were not bred, but iteratively designed. Each generation displays targeted upgrades. Vestigial wing buds appear in later first-age specimens, a clear prelude to the full aerial dominance of Smaug. The reinforced axial skeleton with hollow carbon fiber analog shafts suggests a deliberate campaign to reduce mass and increase lift. No natural selection, but a calculated response to battlefield deficiencies. The glandula ignea, the paired fiery glands, represent a leap in biochemical warfare, a phosphorus-rich napalm, engineered for both range and devastation. This design logic is not confined to anatomy. The behavioral compulsion to hoard and sleep upon gold, so often dismissed as mere greed, may serve a maintenance protocol. When a fire drake slumbers on precious metals, the sustained body heat liquefies gold, allowing it to infiltrate the microfractures of the scale matrix. Over centuries, this process could reinforce the composite armor, repairing damage and enhancing thermal resistance. A self-healing, metallurgically active integument. We propose that hoard dormancy is not just a side effect of avarice, but an engineered cycle of armor renewal, ensuring battlefield readiness even after centuries of torpor. In this framework, Smaug is not a freak of legend, but the apex product of a centuries-long weapons program. His every trait, pyrogenic glands, mineralized scales, pneumatic bones, bears the signature of iterative design, each upgrade a response to the failures of earlier models. Morgoth's legacy is not one of monstrous aberrations, but of deliberate, ruthless innovation. The dragons of the north are not animals. They are the ultimate biomechanical siege engines, shaped by a mind that viewed all life as raw material for war. With this hypothesis established, we turn our attention to the forensic evidence encoded in their very tissues, seeking material proof of this dark lineage. To decode the fire drake's most infamous weapon, we begin with the glandula ignea, the paired deep-seated glands that function as the core of Morgoth's incendiary design. The central question is not simply, how does a dragon breathe fire? But rather, how does it synthesize, store, and control a jet capable of melting stone and steel without destroying itself in the process? Our working model posits a two-phase system. Within each glandula ignea, specialized secretory cells blend a phosphorus-rich substrate likely analogous to white phosphorus, which ignites spontaneously at just 30 degrees Celsius with a dense, long-chain hydrocarbon gel. The result is a viscous napalm-like emulsion tuned for both adhesion and sustained combustion. This fuel is far more volatile than any natural venom or oil. It is a living chemical weapon, engineered for maximal devastation. Laboratory analogs suggest that even a modest admixture, 1 part phosphorus to 10 parts hydrocarbon by volume, could generate a flame front exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius, matching the observed effects in the Siege of Erebor and the Battle of the Five Armies. But synthesis is only half the equation. The real ingenuity lies in storage and safe deployment. The glandula ignea must sequester this unstable emulsion in a pressurized, oxygen-excluded environment, likely using muscular sphincters and anti-backflow valves to prevent accidental ignition. When the dragon prepares to unleash its breath, a rapid contraction forces the emulsion through a narrow muscular duct. As the phosphorus-laden droplets atomize and contact atmospheric oxygen, they ignite instantly, with no need for a spark and no reliance on mythical piezoelectric teeth. The resulting jet is a self-sustaining plasma, propelled by the force of exhalation and shaped by the geometry of the oral cavity. Yet even with these safeguards, one intractable problem remains: the paradox of tissue survival. How does the soft tissue of the mouth, tongue, and esophagus survive repeated exposure to a directed blast hotter than molten iron? The fuel chemistry answers only 80% of the paradox. The remaining 20%, the true miracle or flaw, lies in the refractory lining, a system so extreme it borders on the impossible. That is the next and most urgent question for our investigation. Every fire drake, from Glaurung to Smaug, faces a fundamental design challenge: how to channel a plasma jet exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius down a living throat without catastrophic self-destruction. The answer lies not in flesh, but in a bioceramic conduit, an esophageal lining that blurs the boundary between biology and engineered refractory. We propose that the draconic foregut is sheathed in a silicate mucosa functionally analogous to silicon carbide. On Earth, silicon carbide forms the backbone of spacecraft heat shields and industrial furnaces, retaining structural integrity well above 2,700 degrees Celsius. In the Uroloki, the silicon carbide analog lining is secreted in layers, each infused with trace minerals scavenged from ore-rich diets. The result is a living sheath, glassy and mineralized, that shrugs off thermal spikes, which would vaporize organic tissue in an instant. But insulation alone cannot resolve the heat paradox. Even the best ceramics will fail if thermal energy accumulates. Branching through the submucosal layer is a network of vascular heat sinks, high conductivity veins, reinforced with carbon fiber trabeculae, and loaded with metal-rich hemoglobin. These act as biological heat pipes, siphoning excess energy away from the fire jet's core and distributing it laterally into the thoracic cavity. The heat is then diffused toward the pneumatic wing sacs, where hydrogen's high specific heat capacity absorbs and radiates the surplus. This convective loop prevents focal hotspots, maintaining the mucosa below its catastrophic threshold even during repeated fire episodes. No natural animal approaches this degree of thermal compartmentalization. The fire drake's conduit is a feat of bioengineering, reminiscent of the ablative tiles on a re-entry vehicle, yet self-regenerating and intimately vascularized. In Smaug, this system is so robust that even the tongue and palate, often exposed to direct flame, show evidence of silicate reinforcement and rapid mucosal turnover. The paradox of self-immolation is thus resolved, not by magic, but by a darkly plausible fusion of mineral and flesh. Only once the internal defense is complete does the question turn outward. How does the dragon's external armor resist the same inferno from without? The final barrier between Smaug and annihilation by his own fire is not hidden deep within, but gleams on the surface: the gold composite scale armor. For centuries, scholars dismissed the horde sleeping habit as a symptom of greed. In the Orcologist lab, we interpret it as field evidence of an active metallurgical process. When a fire drake slumbers atop a bed of gold, its core temperature, routinely exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius, brings the surrounding metal to a molten state. Gold, with a melting point at 1,064 degrees Celsius, liquefies and seeps into the microscopic fissures that inevitably form in the keratin diamond lattice of each scale. This is not mere surface gilding. The armor's architecture is a living, self-repairing composite. Diamond particulates, seated within the keratin matrix, act as nucleation points, guiding the infiltration of gold into a dense, interlocking network. The result is a bio-inorganic lattice, hard, flexible, and thermally conductive. Gold's high reflectivity acts as a radiant heat shield, bouncing back a portion of the fire drake's own plasma breath and any external inferno. Its thermal conductivity draws heat laterally across the armor, preventing local hotspots from compromising the scale's integrity. The most remarkable property, however, is self-healing. When microcracks propagate, whether from battle or the stress of repeated fire exposure, the surrounding gold can remelt during periods of torpor, flowing back into the damaged regions and sealing them anew. Over decades, this cycle of damage and renewal results in scale fragments with a distinctive metallic sheen, occasionally recovered from battle sites and horde remains. The armor is not static. It is a dynamic metallurgical skin tuned by the behavior of its bearer. In Smaug, the gold diamond keratin lattice is the final proof that these dragons are not products of evolution, but of dark, iterative engineering, each scale a sample of Morgoth's brutal ingenuity. A dragon the size of Smaug, weighing in at an estimated 15 to 20 tons, presents an immediate problem for any engineer. How does such a mass ever leave the ground? The answer, as always in Morgoth's arsenal, is a solution borrowed from the playbook of nature, then ruthlessly overclocked. The skeletal system of the Orcologist is not a solid framework of bone, but a lattice of pneumatized struts, long, hollow shafts, reinforced with graphene analog protein matrices. Each vertebra, rib, and limb bone is riddled with air-filled cavities, reducing density without sacrificing compressive strength. In the largest recovered specimens, micro-CT imaging reveals bone walls as thin as 2 millimeters, yet capable of withstanding the torsional loads of a full-power wing beat. Wait, but the true leap comes with the introduction of hydrogen into these pneumatic chambers. Hydrogen, at just 0.09 kilograms per cubic meter, is the lightest element known. And when sequestered in a network of sealed sacs throughout the wings and dorsal cavity, it provides static lift, offsetting up to 15% of the dragon's total body weight. This is not a trivial gain. For a 10-ton fire drake, hydrogen buoyancy translates to a reduction of nearly 1,500 kilograms, easing the burden on the flight musculature and allowing for a lower wing loading regime. The principle is ancient. The same physics that lifted the airships of the 19th century is pressed into the flesh of the Orcologist. Hydrogen and buoyancy. Structural lightning alone would leave the frame dangerously fragile. but the composite architecture, carbon fiber analogs, mineralized trabeculae, and a web of tensioned ligaments ensures that the skeleton remains both resilient and flexible. The pneumatic system does double duty, not only providing buoyancy, it also acts as a thermal buffer. Hydrogen's high specific heat capacity allows these chambers to absorb and redistribute excess energy from both metabolic heat and fire breath recoil, protecting the internal organs from thermal spikes. Thermal. The effect is a dragon that defies the square cube law, its mass mitigated by engineering that would make any aerospace designer envious. With the weight problem addressed, the next question is one of force. How do these creatures generate the lift and thrust required for powered flight? The answer lies in the design of their wings and the mechanics of their aerial assault. Square cube and lift. Lift is only the starting point. The real feat is how an Orcologist like Smaug turns sheer anatomical scale into agile, sustained flight. With a wingspan nearing 40 meters and an aspect ratio of 8:1, these wings rival the most efficient gliders ever known. High aspect ratio means less induced drag, letting a multi-ton body cruise at speeds between 80 and 120 kilometers per hour. But surface area alone does not explain it. Each membrane is a living composite, reinforced by carbon fiber analog spars and threaded with vascular channels that double as heat exchangers. A creature of this mass would overwhelm any natural metabolism if relying on muscle alone. Here, biology merges with technology. The wing membranes are studded with solar harvesting organelles, pigment-rich cells, and nano-photovoltaic structures, pulling in up to 150 kilowatts of solar energy in full daylight. This power flows straight to the pectoral and dorsal muscles, supplementing a basal metabolic output that can top 500 kilowatts during peak exertion. The result is a hybrid power system, drawing from both biochemistry and ambient sunlight, fueling continuous wing beats at 2 Hz and supporting rapid, energy-hungry maneuvers. Control comes from a web of articulated joints, clavicular, radial, and digital, allowing the wings to flex, twist, and camber in real time. These are not static sails, but dynamic aerofoils, adjusting angle and camber on the fly. At high speeds, the Reynolds number for these wings enters the transitional regime, where laminar and turbulent flows mix, and small changes in geometry can swing lift and drag dramatically. Wing claws and trailing edge tendons serve as natural flaps and ailerons, giving the Orcologist tight control over ascent, glide, and dive. Thrust vectoring is not just muscle. The fire breath jet can be angled laterally, giving short bursts of directional thrust, a living echo of modern vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. Residual heat from metabolism and fire is absorbed by a vascular heat sink network, radiating excess energy across the membrane and keeping tissue safe. Here, lift, power, and heat shedding work as one, turning mass and heat into sustained, controlled fury. Report number 05 leaves us with one certainty, fellow researchers. The dragons of Morgoth are not mere monsters. but precision-forged engines of war. Each glandula ignea and silicate scale volatile is a testament to biomechanical terror. As we turn to the cold drakes, we must ask, if fire can be engineered, what of absolute cold? In Middle-earth, the boundaries of the possible remain disturbingly flexible. Share your own hypotheses below.